Tell me now, and show me how to understand what makes a good man. Tell me now, hey, walk the line, hey, understand what makes a good man. Ain't nothing wrong with this chemistry, ain't nothing wrong with this blasphemy, and time will tell that there's the pedigree. Experience is another one meant for me. Tell me now, and show me how to understand what makes a good man. Tell me now, hey, walk the line, hey, understand what makes a good man. Good man.
I ain't tired of sweating for blood and dirt. I ain't tired of sweating for what it's worth. 'Cause lines get drawn, lines get kicked and blurred. Indelible is what I need to spread the word.
Tell me now, and show me how to understand what makes a good man. Tell me now, hey, walk the line, hey, understand what makes a good man. Good man. Tell me now, and show me how to understand what makes a good man. Tell me now, hey, walk the line, hey, understand what makes a good man. Good man.
Hello and welcome to another Digital Naked Faith. This is our worship service for March of 2022. For the uninitiated, Naked Faith is an alternative worship service aimed at youth and young adults, but open to everybody, where we explore a theme that's near and dear to our hearts, and we play some music that we think is pretty cool. My name is Andrew, I'll be one of your hosts for this video, and this is Josh. This month we're continuing our year-long exploration of social justice topics. And for this video, we're talking about the theme of toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is the idea that there are stereotypes and expectations of what it is to be masculine, what it is to be a man, that include things like you gotta be tough, you can't show emotions, boys can't cry, those kind of ideas. And these stereotypes, these expectations have negative impacts on the mental health of individuals and also has negative, harmful effects on society. For exploring this, we decided we wanted to do things a little bit differently. Instead of having Josh and I just talk at you for the entire video, we put together a group of very smart individuals from our church community and had a roundtable discussion. And so that's going to be the main part of this video, the main theme exploration. So without further ado, here we go.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we're recording, Josh. Just be serious.
Has anyone seen the Batman?
The
weather's good.
Yeah,
You know, like how.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
I've got this pop can here, but that's about it. Sort of sidetrack a little bit. I thought that was interesting.
I see Simon has raised his hand.
Sorry.
You guys are so smart.
I have a question for Miller.
All right, go for it.
I'm not going to answer it.
My first question is, how dare you? My second question, who do you think you are?
We lost Josh. Okay.
All right, tell me when.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Hi, welcome to Naked Faith's first ever roundtable discussion. Josh and I thought that doing this would be a little bit of an interesting way to explore our theme of toxic masculinity, rather than just having me and him talking at a screen about all our own ideas. We thought, why don't we actually sit and talk with some other smart people? So we couldn't find them, and so instead we got these. Got him. So it's me and Josh are joined by Matthew, by Andrew, and by Simon. I know they're all in different locations. And we're just here to explore the theme of toxic masculinity. Let's just dive right in. To kick things off, we want to kind of define the theme. Talk about what is toxic masculinity, because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. And I think a lot of people have a general idea of what it is. But I'm curious, what are the ways we would define it? What are the general definitions for it?
Not an actual definition, just what I take away from it. Is any really like trait, like generally considered like that a male or would have that like almost like impedes on others in a way, or like creates a negative impact, I guess, on them and those around them, and in society in general, I guess.
I think it's crucial that it comes from that heritage of gender norms and what was necessary in the past, or what was perceived as being necessary in the past, and how that still lingers in unproductive ways today. An area where toxic masculinity has profound effect is in an individual's capacity to establish and maintain healthy relationships with other men, their fathers, and with women, and people who don't fall into that realm of traditional masculinity, right?
And that seems like very tied to like those ideas of power and control, and then like the inability to be vulnerable, it seems.
I like what Simon said about the tradition part of it, as in like it's handed down almost from like father to son, like, and like when we think back, if it was ever actually necessary, but at some point in time it sprung up, and here we are at this point in time where it's kind of rampant and not necessary at all.
This idea that's come up a couple of times of, was it necessary at some point, or did it serve some kind of function, or did it stem from something that did serve a function? I think that's an interesting question.
I think really when we're talking about toxic masculinity, I think the root of that comes from gender norms, right? And gender norms are part of, I think, every society. And it starts as things where you need part of society to do certain tasks, and you need part of society to do other tasks, right? Part of it is perhaps biological, right? When you talk about really, really ancient history, where there's, hunting versus caring for children, do you have the physical and biological hardware to support a child? If not, go do something useful. Right?
The thing is the way we make meaning is through cultural and social relations. Meaning is founded in relation. Those things are normalized because we accept them as socially normal things. And so maybe back then it was appropriate for these ideas to exist because there was that whole idea of the men do the hunting and the women do other things. But as meaning changes and society has conversations and negotiates these ideas, we change our perceptions of roles.
I think what I was thinking about is this is something, it's not new, right? I think we've been aware of this a long time. I feel like my whole life I've been aware of this idea of, oh, the toxic masculinity, and it's okay to show emotions and, you know, push against that. And so I've known this idea, but yet it still persists and we still see it. And I think we still get affected by it. Why do you think it still persists, even if we're aware of it, even if we're talking about it, even if we're trying to challenge it?
First, there's an aspect of culture, right? And how culture permeates media and established tropes about heroes and what it means to be a man, and these fictional icons that as developing people we all look up to. Those are institutions that are a lot harder to change and to influence over the span of one lifetime versus, say, the perspective of an individual. I think another contributing factor to this is that even the act of questioning traditional masculinity invalidates your opinion among people who still hold those values sincerely, because they feel that you can't have an opinion on this unless you're a man in their perception, right? And that it's really hard for you to have an opinion on anything unless you're a man in their perception.
Right. Like there's no perceived benefit to these people to change. Like if you don't understand exactly how it affects your life, you're not going to see any benefit to do it. So like, where's the motivation to change or even to listen to someone where you're like, well, this has worked for me so far. My father's father, and you know, every male before me has been like this. It's worked. Obviously, I'm doing great. The authority is what we need. And so it's really hard to be like, no, like this is actually impacting you in ways you can't see. And it's hard to say in a rational conversation a lot of the times if you don't have, you know, good ways of communicating that.
I think you're absolutely right. The philosophy of this is the way it always has been, and so this is the way it always shall be, is a really difficult idea for so many people to shake.
I think that also the perpetuation of these traits and these ideas also has to do with the idea that like negativity is really loud. Whereas positivity has like quiet strength. And even when the quiet strength gets louder, it's still sometimes muffled by the negativity. So I think sometimes it's just because it's hard to talk over all the garbage.
And I think the media kind of emphasizes that too, with a lot of like negativity, and it's easily publicized, and then they can just roll with that. Whereas, like you say, Josh, with those positive like influences, it's harder to make that same impact, that same change. And it kind of is portrayed in the media that way too, right?
So like, of course, these things persist because it's designed socioculturally and psychologically to do so. And it takes a lot of actual real work to break those patterns and behaviors.
I'm curious how the concepts or the stigmas, the perpetuated ideas of toxic masculinity have affected each of us in some way.
I think I've been very fortunate that I have a lot of really positive role models in my life, the men in this room included. I also believe that I've been really fortunate to be born or to find my way into social circles that encourage questioning the norm, right? That they're really open to having genuine conversations about the necessity of emotions and the harm of toxic masculinity and all that. I think that when I was younger and into school and junior high and high school, it was perhaps a part of my ego that I felt like my peers respected me in some ways because I exemplified some forms of masculinity, right? And not all of them. And I don't mean aggression or dominance or some of those really, really harmful things. But there is definitely an idea that persisted in high school among my peers that every group kind of has an alpha, but that is part of your validity is what other people think of you. And that in and of itself is not necessarily a masculine idea, but it is a very toxic idea.
It was kind of hard to acknowledge, or at least like I thought for the longest time, I was like, oh, I'm avoiding all of this, no problem, no big deal. But I feel like a big one is actually talking to your, fellow friend, like you guys, and opening up and being vulnerable in that sense. Because I tend to joke around with you guys, whatever, and like skirt the serious topics a little bit of like things that are impacting my life, like things that make me like any real meaningful conversation. And I think that was a good like eye opener, in the sense that I don't think a lot of us have actually beaten toxic masculinity. So for me, I guess it's still a journey.
In my experience, I've kind of witnessed toxic masculinity, definitely in sports. It's pretty prominent. First thing that comes to mind is like if someone gets an injury or something on the field, the expectation is, oh, you have to be this tough guy, manly, and you should shake off any sort of injury.
Yeah.
And not just not show your emotions either. Like if you're really hurt, not cry and that kind of thing. But there's also like the idea that, oh, you have to be big and strong, like you can't be a scrawny athlete or anything like that. I'm sure you guys are all aware that like with sports, there's a huge mental side to it. And if you're not doing well mentally up here, you might not perform on the field or the whatever you're playing on. But in the change room, you might not be talking with your teammates and that kind of thing. You're just joking around rather than sharing some vulnerable emotions that you might be experiencing. What I've noticed too is like with an injury, the expectation, like I kind of talked about, is like shaking it off. A lot of times if they happen to manage to do that, like people in the crowd, for example, will applaud, oh, that person shook that injury off. So it's almost like it might not be the intention, but it almost seems to be like emphasizing that idea that, oh, they are manly or whatever because they did shake that off and they're managing to get off that playing area or whatever.
I joke about it a lot, but like I am a big fat man. And I grew up as like a short fat kid. I played sports. I was bad at them. I would have liked to be better, but I didn't do things that were defined as typically masculine. I was in choir. I took cooking lessons. I did things that were culturally defined as more feminine things. And as a result, now that I'm grown, like I attempt to be comfortable with who I am, but I do like things. I do like some sports. I do like doing some things. And as a result of the activities I did as a kid being defined as not masculine, I have a great amount of uncomfortable energy participating in masculine things now that I'm older because I feel out of place. So I really like volleyball. I also really like singing. And there's this weird tension between the two because I feel like I want to be okay with who I am. And at the exact same time, there's cultural pressures that say you should like certain things, you should be certain things. And because you don't look a certain way, can't participate in certain things, you're not as masculine. And one of the worst things about it, and something that I was able to perceive after Simon shared some videos, was that if you're not being hyper masculine, then you're perceived as feminine, and feminine attributes are then the ultimate shame, which is awful, because there's no reason that masculinity or femininity should be better than one another.
I saw it a lot in like how friends would talk to each other and how I'd talk with friends. And I noticed that pressure to get pulled into talking a certain way and kind of like, you know, the boys talking to each other, and that pressure to almost create this like divide with girls or just whoever we were attracted to. And like, not an intentionally hostile, malicious thing, obviously. But it's this sense of like, it's like gamifying dating. It's like, it's a game, right? And how can I make them like me? That is this very us versus them thing that I think gets really gross and uncomfortable. And I noticed myself, especially like when I was younger, I think like 18, 19, of the pressure to get pulled into that kind of language, and where it was like not, obviously not, I mean, I hope not who I am at the core, but it was almost, I realized I was to some level like, this is what turns into objectifying people. This is what turns into treating people like dehumanizing people. It's not to say that like, you know, dating should be fun, but that versus making it a game and how can I like manipulate somebody else to, like it's just, that I think that was the biggest thing that stood out to me. There was a way people talked about it, and I noticed there was a pressure to get pulled into that. Wow.
Yeah, no, I agree with you with a lot of like with dating, always like that they always seem to focus on like the looks of the girls and like how to like make her like you, instead of like genuinely exploring how the two of you like communicate and stuff. And instead it turns into like a game or manipulation, like make her like me, or if she doesn't, then she's just, you know, the worst, you know.
Right.
I think it's interesting what you guys are talking about, and the way that toxic masculinity can disguise itself as social milieu. Like it's just a part of hanging out with the guys.
Yeah.
It disguises itself as this requirement for acceptance. And whether or not we believe those things and genuinely subscribe to toxic masculinity, the perpetuation of those behaviors and patterns, despite your belief in them, still then perpetuates it.
Yes.
We use metaphors like actions speak louder than words. When words actually really matter, the way we define things, the way we speak about things actually is very important. And if we hold these two values separate, like I would never do that, but I speak in such a way, how is anyone ever supposed to be a complete person when their thoughts don't match their actions? One's got to give.
Yeah. And what are you role modeling to other people? Right? Like if you speak that way and other people are hearing you speak that way, that's perpetuating, that's teaching other people something. And if you internally believe something different, that's not what you're putting out there.
They'll never know that.
I'm very curious about this question of how would you redefine masculinity?
This isn't just a men's issue, but it is a status quo or a gender norms issue, right? And the idea that you have more value as a person, or that you lack value as a person, depending on whether or not you fit into what's expected of you based on what gender you were assigned at birth. I would want to redefine masculinity. I would scratch that word or that term from the list and just talk about what makes you valuable as a person, right? What makes you helpful and a contribution to your circles in society.
My immediate reaction to that question is, do we even need to redefine masculinity? Like, does there even need to be masculinity and femininity? Why can't we just have those good qualities of being a human being that Simon was talking about and just be defined as humans, like human beings, rather than having those gender norms, gender roles? But maybe there is some importance there. I don't know.
it's interesting because I think this whole idea of like be a man has been part of the toxic masculinity, right? Be tough, be aggressive, be the alpha, be whatever. And I think I've almost like kind of what you have been saying is that part of me has redefined that as, to me, if I think of the saying be a man, to me it means being kind, being compassionate, being empathetic, problem solving things in the non-aggressive way. But then it goes back to the whole idea of, I think my mind just redefined that because it's just a cultural saying of be a man. But it's like,
Yeah.
why do we even need that saying? Yeah,
All
because
the
that
things
just goes
you
back
just
to being
described are just you being a person, being a good person,
exactly. Yeah.
right? All it takes to be a man is to identify as a man, right? So you have he, him pronouns, and you're a man. That's all it takes. What it takes to be a good man is to not just be a good person, but also recognize that the world we live in is flawed, and that identifying and presenting as a man makes you fit a certain role in some people's psyche or in their lives or in their fears. And being a good man is understanding that while you exist in this role, you have a responsibility to be conscious of the way that men can make people feel unsafe, right? And that as a man, you have a responsibility to understand that just raising your voice can make someone feel scared, right? Not because you're being loud, but because you're a man raising his voice, right? Or that just you being present, or the words that you chose, or I don't know, even where you look, right? Can determine whether or not someone feels safe around you. So being a good man is understanding that while you occupy this role in society, you have to take responsibility for the comfort of those around you when it pertains to your presence.
How does masculinity show up in faith? And is there, like, does toxic masculinity show up in faith? And I know, Matthew, you had some thoughts on this.
Oh dear. Okay.
Spotlight's on you.
Well, just like immediate thought, I was like, does masculinity have to have a role in faith? And then obviously you think a bit deeper and reflect a bit deeper, and you realize, oh, there's quite a bit of masculinity in the sense that, okay, like in the Bible, I guess Jesus is a dude, and he's referred to as, I believe I haven't read the Bible in a while, so don't quote me on this.
Yeah,
So, and then if you look at, like, I don't know, like the Catholic form of Christianity, like, and their way of doing things, like every like hierarchy level, it's always dudes, like priests, cardinals, pope, all dudes. So that seems like a bit of a form of toxic masculinity to me.
The commonly held representation of God is masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting to think about why that is perpetuated. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I know, like, because there's been some takes of God being a woman in some media, and it's always slammed to be like, well, why do you gotta do that? He's just a dude, it's fine. And it's like, you're talking about like this creator of the universe. It kind of matters like how someone views him or her, or however, like it's no real.
Why is an inconceivable deity perceived as a man? That's the question.
Yeah.
I think it's looking at the leaders in the church, like you've been saying. I think looking at the ways pronouns have been used to refer to God, and that, the United Church has been trying to change some of these things, and more and more, I think different pronouns, she, them, are used in like the Lord's Prayer and those kind of things, and that's cool ways to break it down a little bit. But also looking, it's recognizing our own history. Like we're obviously not immune to oppression within the United Church as well, in many different ways.
I think it's also worth noting how so frequently the female figures in the Bible are it's just like poorly written female characters, right? Like they only exist further the plot of men, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the most important female figure I can think of is Mary, and her contribution to Christianity is being the vessel for God, right? If we think about Adam and Eve, who was it that doomed all of humanity for all eternity? Was it? No, it was the woman, right? And just the fact that these things are still in the stories that we teach to our children, even if they're as metaphors or as guiding principles. A lack of female representation is important in the spiritual world, just as it is in other forms of media that you consume, right? Like having strong female leads in your TV shows and in your movies. There'd be a lot of value in having that representation, even in these old cultural relics from the past.
Yeah. Whenever they reboot the Bible, they need to put more female characters.
This month, we had a really open and candid conversation about toxic masculinity, how we define it, how it affects us in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives, how it affects other people. Going forward, we hope that you're able to notice and challenge toxic masculinity when it comes up. Sometimes it's less obvious than others. As we talked about, sometimes toxic masculinity disguises itself as social protocol. And it's our jobs within the theme of this whole year to challenge those things that keep people oppressed, that foster toxic atmospheres. Have the hard conversations. Challenge yourself, challenge others. Think about what it means not to be a man, but to be a good man. Think of what it means to be a good person. Before we close things off tonight, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. A big thank you, as always, to everyone who makes Naked Faith possible, to the band for all their hard work with the music, to everybody who helps out with the video. Thank you to our guests for speaking to us this month. Thank you for everyone behind the scenes, Brenda, Andrew, for being my co-host. And thank you to you guys for being here month after month, engaging in these really hard topics with us. We know it's not easy, but we're happy that you're here and engaging. Come and join us on the Naked Faith Instagram after this video. We always do a live stream over there on Instagram at Naked Faith. We chat about the theme, have an overall great time, and we'd love to see you there. As always, we will see you next month, and stay safe, everybody. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Look,
That is fair.
shark.
Shark.
Hey, neat.
Look, a helicopter.
Whoa!
Oh.
That's awesome.
That's sweet.